Hey you! Yeah you! I stream on Twitch 4 times a week at twitch.tv/demonjoe, and you should totally come hang out and join the community over there. Link in the description. No! 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 Don't you do it! Don't you take... Chad, the ground demons are taking me! Please! I don't want to go! I don't want to go, Chad! I don't want to go! No! Now listen, I've heard the feedback that you guys want to see longer weapon reviews from me. While a lot of you have shown so much love to my oddly timed 1 minute and 1 second videos, which won't be going anywhere by the way, plenty of you guys have said that you missed older videos of mine like the Stochastic and Last Breath weapon reviews that were a bit more fleshed out. So today I want to talk to you all about one of the most slept on weapons in Season of the Haunted that may have not even crossed your mind. Not only have I never seen anybody mention this weapon to me in both my comment section or my Twitch chat, but also because it doesn't even make it into the top 50 list of most used PvE weapons on Destiny Tracker. So in today's video, I want to sit down with you all and talk about the most slept on weapon this season, the Chain of Command Seasonal Ritual Weapon. And with the new LMG buff that we just got, this gun is definitely something worth being on your radar. Now let's make something abundantly clear, just because a weapon is slept on doesn't mean it's a godlike weapon or the best ever. I know some people will be in the comments arguing that such and such is better, which at that point, you're arguing a point that doesn't even exist. What I will say is that Chain of Command proves its usefulness inside in-game content in a way that no other weapon can do currently, but we'll get to that later. Before jumping into it, if you enjoy the video and want to support the content, a like and subscribe would mean a metric shit ton to me, and without further ado, let's jump into this. To kick off the review, I'd like to take a look at Chain of Command, talk about how to get it, and make a few comparisons to other LMGs so we know what we're looking at here. Firstly, if you guys somehow didn't already know, Chain of Command is a ritual weapon, meaning it comes from leveling any of the 3 core activity vendors. Me personally, I just grinded out some Nightfalls to get all the vendor rep I needed, but do whatever you want and eventually you'll get your hands on it. Now upon getting the weapon, you'll immediately notice that it's got quite the unique perk roll to it. In the first main perk column, we can pick and choose between both Adrenaline Junkie and Osmosis, while the second column offers either Demolitionist or Adapted Munitions. Taking a closer look, we can see that Chain of Command is a stasis weapon, making it the second ever stasis LMG, and it also resides in the 450 archetype, which most associate with the best LMGs in the game. Think Commemoration, Corrective Measure, Hammerhead, all the greats that we know and love. You'll also notice that this weapon comes with 3 different origin traits: the Vindication trait, which gives health on kills, the Quiet Moment trait, which increases reload speed outside combat, and the Tracker trait, which is for Gambit, so we don't talk about Gambit. Out of all of these, I definitely take the Vindication trait, but Quiet Moment isn't bad either, as it only takes 5 seconds without being shot or hitting an enemy to proc. So now that we've taken a look at the surface level of this weapon, let's dive deeper and discuss the interesting perk selection that Chain of Command offers us. While Chain may be the second LMG to come into the game as stasis element, it's the first LMG that is rolled with Osmosis, and the first LMG that is rolled with Adapted Munitions. On top of all this, it also joins the group of very few guns with the ability to roll both Adapted Munitions and a damage perk at the same time. With that said, let's talk about how you're going to utilize all these perks together inside both casual and in-game content, as there isn't one definitive role that you should really stick to here. Starting off with casual content, the obvious role you're going to want here is Adrenaline Junkie and Demolitionist. These 2 perks completely feed off of each other in the best way possible, and fun fact, the only other LMG with this perk combo is Corrective Measure. With Chain being a stasis weapon, that opens up plenty of stasis synergy in regards to elemental well builds, as they're incredibly easy to take advantage of thanks to the elemental shards mod, making stasis shards count as wells. If you want to take advantage of stasis shards, if you're on Warlock, make sure you have Glacial Harvest equipped as your aspect, on Titan use Tectonic Harvest, and finally for Hunter, make sure to use Grim Harvest. Normally for stasis builds, I find myself defaulting to Warlock and creating a stasis turret army, and Chain of Command is perfect for that given both its element and Demolitionist, making the playstyle even more powerful. Adrenaline Junkie would be a little less potent in this example, as stasis turrets rarely proc the perk on their own, but will have no problem building those stacks manually with kills. To make sure we're consistently being fed stasis crystals, aka wells, we need to make sure we're constantly getting our nade back so it can continue freezing enemies. So with this build, build I'm using Stasis Warlock with Bleak Watcher for the turret, Grim Harvest for the crystals, with my fragments being Refraction for class energy, Rhyme for survivability, Torment for nade energy, and Conduction to easily collect our stasis crystal wells. Taking a look at the armor, my gloves are obviously the 𝗹𝗙𝗡𝗍𝗔𝗍 gauntlets for 2 turrets at a time with elemental shards, and dual grenade kickstart equipped. My bond has Font of Might to give us a 25% damage boost after picking up stasis crystals, and it features dual bomber mods to give us massive chunks of our nade back after popping a rift, and this will synergize directly with the refraction fragment I mentioned earlier. Moving on, my chest piece has elemental armaments to help produce even more wells, and initially I thought to have my boots feature elemental charge to let us get charged with light from the wells, and then I'd run firepower on my helmet to use up our charges of light to give us even more nade energy, but I found out that the energy it gave back was next to nothing on top of the 2 kickstarts, so if you guys have any ideas then definitely feel free to make changes there. Something like elemental time dilation might be worth running instead to synergize with Font of Might's damage boost. Anyways, these are all pieces of the puzzle which are helped by our machine gun, which will not only give us grenade energy on every kill, but also a 33% damage buff with Adrenaline Junkie that is even further increased to almost 60% with Font of Might active. With our nade coming back as often as it does, we also won't have to worry about reloading too often thanks to Demolitionist doing that for us. Now, this is only an example of what you can do in casual content with this weapon. Obviously, I know not everybody mains Warlock Stasis, and while I can't give you guys builds for the rest of the classes because this video would be way too long, if you're ever wanting to get the most out of Adrenaline Junkie on Stasis, just remember that shattering glacial walls and killing an enemy that way will give you all 5 stacks of the damage buff. I didn't even know that until today, so the more you know, I guess. Just make sure you're running the fissures and rending fragments to break those walls easier and make the shatter radius bigger. Now, with Chain of Command's casual content use being talked about, let's finally talk about what makes this weapon truly special, and that's its place inside the in-game PvE sandbox. So I'm not exactly sure how many of you are deeply rooted in master content, whether that be raids, dungeons, lost sectors, nightfalls, or maybe even the Witch Queen campaign missions you can grind for crafting mats, but if you tend to find yourself in that content often, Chain might be the perfect weapon for you given what role you play in a fire team. Because of the LMG buff this season giving the weapon type 40% extra damage across the board, we can definitely notice them hitting much harder as a result, and that's where we can see a drastic increase in the usefulness of the Adaptive Munitions perk on this weapon. When taking a look at primary weapons that roll this perk, for example, it takes nearly an entire magazine to deplete a shield inside match game content, and that is including armor-piercing rounds on the weapon in the clip you see here. For the Chain of Command though, literally no shield is safe from it, match game or not, and the best part of it all is that Chain doesn't have to make the trade-off of replacing a damage perk at the expense of this newfound utility as it rolls with Adrenaline Junkie at the same time. Now, I know what you're thinking, yeah Joey, that's great and all, but why would I use Chain of Command on my heavy slot in GMs for example, when we have weapons like Reed's Regret or the newly found Storm Chaser? And that's a good point, but that's where we come to the conclusion of what niche this weapon fills in the sandbox. Divinity users, rise up, because it's your time in the spotlight. Listen, we all know that overloads inside this game are an absolute bitch to deal with, and not only that, but champions as a whole can be too. And that's where your Giga Chad Divinity user comes into play, because not only is Divinity the most efficient way of dealing with overloads, but it may as well be for most every beefy target in the game. When playing through GMs, regardless of the enemy, it's just always nice to have that one fire team member apply a div bubble for the easy crit spot on top of the debuff for quick kills. So what exactly should the loadout look like for your average div user? Well, even before the LMG buff we received this season, anytime I found myself running div through master content, I always ran double special and used a machine gun as my primary weapon, and you guys can probably see where I'm going with this. Most div users know exactly what I'm talking about, as there really isn't much of a reason to use a kinetic primary. Instead, it's much more efficient to run something like blinding nades in your kinetic slot for crowd control, divinity in your energy slot for a debuff, and a machine gun in your heavy to act as your primary weapon. When utilizing this setup, heavy ammo is never an issue because of how high the drop chance is, not to mention Aeon gauntlets, and neither are shielded enemies an issue, as the div user can be the jack of all trades on the fire team. They'll mainly be utilized to not only overload champs, debuff beefy targets, blind potential threats, but also be able to pop any shield at any time throughout the mission with this weapon equipped. And this is where I feel the true potential of Chain of Command comes into play. It heightens the ceiling of what a Divinity user can do inside master content by giving them yet another piece of their toolkit, making them even more valuable than before in a way that no other weapon currently can. Whenever Grandmasters finally drop this season, I really look forward to be taking on that role of div user in the fire team and giving this loadout a go throughout my hours of grinding them out. Chain of Command might not be a superstar weapon that absolutely power creeps every other gun in the game, but at the very least, it has a strong spot inside the PvE sandbox as a mainstay option, and many weapons currently can't even say that. With all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it for me today. I hope I was able to provide some insight on the usefulness of Chain of Command, as I haven't seen anybody mention just how good this weapon is as of yet, so hopefully I've helped get a few eyes on it. Of course, I know many of you aren't always grinding out the hardest content in the game, so Chain of Command's main use won't be too important to you, but I hope you enjoyed the little preview I gave of its usefulness inside casual content as well. Anyways guys, that's it for the video. If you enjoyed the content today, please feel free to leave a like to support it, and please, if you have any future suggestions on weapons you'd like to see properly reviewed, leave them in the comments, as I might make this a main series on the channel to go alongside my usual weapon set overviews. As always, a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters, and shout out to my tier 2s, Homebase, Onrock, Crunchwrap, Admis, Vile, and John, as well as my tier 3s, Neon, 𝘁𝗵𝗄, Austin, and 𝗁𝗍𝗓𝗍. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.